Makes sense, yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's still morning. A wonderful morning to you all. We apologize that this event is starting a little behind schedule, and that's the number of the VIPs that have been invited. The labor of our heroes past shall never be in vain. To serve with heart and mind, one nation bound in freedom, peace and unity. I crave your indulgence. We'll say an opening prayer with the second stanza of the national anthem. O God of creation, direct our noble cause, guide our leaders right, help our youths the truth to know, in love and honesty to grow, and living just and true, great lofty heights attain, to build a nation where peace and justice shall reign. Amen. Please be seated. Once again, I welcome you, ladies and gentlemen, to this august event. It's one of the very few that is held this year, and you can see that we're holding it in very strange times. In the middle of a pandemic, we are all trying to observe social distancing and, wear our masks and all that we need to do. Nonetheless, when the country calls, or should I say, when people write a book of this nature, it is only wise and it's only good that we gather to talk about it, to talk about where we are as a people, to talk about how it is that we can move forward. It was Chinua Achebe who wrote in his book, The Problem with Nigeria in 1983, that said that Nigerians like to talk about their country, the problems of their country, like the British talk about the weather. But very rarely do we see a book being written to proffer solutions to the problems that face us as a people. And I'm sure that's why we're gathered here this morning, ladies and gentlemen. I have to welcome you once again very warmly to this event. We are saying, I hope you can see it. Yeah, well, it's there, right there. Nigeria, Democracy Without Development, How to Fix It, is the book we're gathered here to present, written by Dr. Omano Edigheji. And to open the floor and to talk about, or to give the opening remarks to this event, we have with us Dr. Kayode Fayemi, who is the governor of Ekiti State. He has been here represented by Senator Olubunmi Adetumbi, who is representing Ekiti North Senatorial District. He is the chairman, Senate Committee on National Planning and Economic Affairs. Senator, if we can have you to this event. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mokwe. It's a privilege to be here representing the governor of Ekiti State in the person of Dr. John Kayode Fayemi. He has asked me to express his apologies for absence, which is due to other national engagements, which makes it impossible for him to be here. but I will be representing him and say a few words. The title of this work, Whether Democracy Produces Development, or is it development that produces democracy? I think that's really the content of this book. And the key issue here, ladies and gentlemen, do we really have democracy? Can we really have democracy without development? What is development and what is democracy? And what is the relationship between both of them? I think that is what the narrative of this book is all about. I've not read the book, so I'm not going to speak to the content, but from the title. And I'd like to make very simple assertions that, in my view, I think development will deliver democracy, but not the other way around. Because in an environment where you have poverty, lack of consensus on vision for the people, for the nation, it's difficult to really talk about democracy. And I hold the view, and I believe Dr. Fayemi does, that without development, it's difficult to sustain democracy, because democracy presupposes that people are interested in enforcing freedoms and participating in governance through contributions of representation. But how do you do this when majority of the people are not even able to put food on the table? I think we'll be able to elaborate on this. I have not seen the book, like I said. But I hold the view that to have a democratic state, we first and foremost must succeed as a developmental state. Because it is when you get rid of poverty and illiteracy and despair and insurgency, which is a byproduct of poverty, it is only when this malaise, these human calamities are taken away from a polity, from a geographical jurisdiction, that is the only time you can say that democracy can work. Without much ado, I think this is a very, very useful contribution to public debate and public literature in Nigeria, and I hope that all the people here today will align with me by saying that the author should be congratulated for giving the public food for thought about the relationship between democracy and development. Democracy can only be sustained by people who are happy, who have livelihood, who can foresee a future for themselves and their children. And because of the current stability and prosperity they enjoy, they want to use the instrument of democracy to sustain that. Unfortunately, we are believing that democracy in our instance will lead to development, and that has been the experience of Nigeria since our independence. That is why I believe any government, including the current government, needs to invest more time, a lot more thinking, and bring all hands on deck so that we can solve the problem of developmental deficit in this country as a necessary condition for sustaining our democracy. On this note, I would like to once again congratulate the author, and I look forward to a successful deliberation this morning. Thank you very much.
Please, may we have another round of applause? a little more energy in this room would be very useful. I'm sure that we're all happy to be here. Senator, thank you so much. I think that he's thrown the first salvo. I imagine that much later it should get a little heated here. That conversation as to whether or not democracy leads to development or it's the other way around. I imagine that we're going to be fired mentally with the panels that we're expecting much later. But as we proceed in this event, I'd like to first of all acknowledge a few people in no particular order. First, I've already welcomed people very warmly, and I dare say that everybody here is important. No, some are not more important than others. But the author has asked me to acknowledge some people who has made, I think who have made writing this book perhaps a pleasure for him, and also made this event, gracing this event today. Dr. Yemi Dikpeolu, Mohammed Sani Abdullahi, you're welcome. Professor Kabiru Mato, Professor Patu Tomi, Dr. Ayobe, Thomas Gyang, Dr. Amina Belloni, Muyiwa Adekeye, Dr. Otive Igbuzo, Hajia Afsat Baba, Senator Oba Sani, Alhaji Lamido Balara. You're all welcome. Please. Well, now we move to goodwill messages. Yet, if Innocent Chukuma, who is the West Africa representative of Ford Foundation, is here already. Is he? Yes, please. Thank you so much for coming. Would like to have your goodwill messages, your goodwill message, rather. Yes, please.
Still morning. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I welcome the opportunity to be here to offer a few goodwill words to my good friend Omano Edigheji on the occasion of the launching of his book, Democracy Without Development. And also to say that the Ford Foundation is very happy to be associated with the events of today. I remember about a year or so ago when Edigheji kept harassing me. He wants to write a book about the developmental state, which apparently he had written his PhD thesis on, and to elaborate on the current situation in Nigeria. I didn't need much persuasion to say we'll provide a little support to make that happen. Because since 1999, almost in every beer parlor you go to or any realization spot, people talk about democracy without dividend. People talk about democracy without participation, without representation. And then you have the paradox of increasing participation without representation. And everybody wanting to know or preferring his or her own ideas about how we came to the juncture where we are today and what we could do. And I felt if anybody was qualified to comment on that development, Edigheji should be one of them. Because right from the early 90s when we worked together in CLO, under the leadership of our then President Ayobe, who is in the audience, Edigheji has not hidden his passion for the development of Nigeria. And the question is, why do we have democracy without development? I know we have two panel sections that are going to do justice to it today. But the good thing about goodwill message is that you can direct it in any direction you want,
And since we are waiting for the dignitaries in quote who will come and share their thoughts with us, I felt I should share one or two ideas I have about how we got to where we are today, which can inform the discussion. I think the book talked about it in chapter 3, where the author discussed about godfatherism and the subversion of democracy and development. And my view is that when we call it godfatherism, we're actually belittling a fundamental problem that has bedeviled the Fourth Republic in Nigeria. Because for me, it's not just godfatherism. It's actually criminal networks hijacking our polities and producing criminal governance. And when you have criminal governance, you cannot have development because it's all about hijacking the state to feed fat the individuals that supported both the electoral process and the candidates that emerged out of it. And then the next question is, how come we all are talking about criminal governance, godfatherism today? Why is the Fourth Republic so, if you like, afflicted with this phenomenon when you compare it with the previous republics, whether it's the Second Republic or the First Republic? And my thinking, my, if you like, proposition is that it's actually related to the process or the nature of registration of political parties that we had in 1998 leading to the elections. What do I mean by this? A lot of us will remember that when the political parties were being represented, there was this criteria about meeting certain level of penetration, being national in nature, national in character, spreading all over the 36 states of Nigeria, having offices that are verified by INEC before a party will be registered to run. And you ask yourself, coming from over 15 years of military rule, who are the people in the country that have the kind of resources to put together this structure of parties before they are registered? 36 states offices all in one place before they are registered. And my thinking is that it's only those who fed fat during the military and have amassed so much wealth that they didn't know what to do with it, that were able to put together the kind of resources that we needed to build these parties. And that's why we ended up with two very national parties with the spread all over the country and the resources required. But at the end of the day, what did they do? They lost the people. So you had situations where a few individuals could put several billions together to set up these offices, and they didn't need the people. And the kind of democracy that produced is perhaps a democracy without the people. So you replace wherever you see the people in the definition of that democracy with godfathers. So it's a government of godfathers, by godfathers, for godfathers. And when they completely took over the system, you will be expecting too much to ask them to deliver dividends of democracy in terms of development. And you look at the kind of party system we had in the Second and the First Republic. These are parties that are rooted in the mass, whether they are locally based or ethnic based. There is a correlation between whoever emerged in terms of representing those parties and the people who were behind them. So you had a situation where, whether it's in First Republic or Second Republic, no one party was able to win at the first ballot and needed to go into alliance with the other parties to be able to produce a government. And all those people who came into the alliance with the parties that eventually formed government know who they are representing. So there are people who can resign any day. The government they are serving did not represent the interests of the people that put them forward. But today, none of the people who are holding positions in government dare resign from the government. So a president can fire them any day, but because they have no loyalty, no allegiance to any community or any constituency, they would then go like that. And we fix this. And for me, since Mokwe started by quoting Chinua Achebe, there was one sentence credited to Chinua Achebe, I think he's no longer artist, where he said, "It doesn't matter how fast you go, so long as you're headed in the wrong direction, you must go back to ground zero and start afresh." And the question is, what do I mean by ground zero? It's not about deconstructing the Fourth Republic. It's actually all the people, all the stakeholders in the Fourth Republic agreeing that we have veered off from the right path, that we need to come to a place, a table, a platform to discuss and ask ourselves, is this the democracy that we all gave our adult life to? Is this the kind of system that a lot of people were expelled, a lot of people were detained, a lot of people were maimed, brutalized, and all of that? Here we are 21 years later, and it's not leading us anywhere. And until we agree to do that and set up a framework that will guide us on a path that would lead to basically doing what the people that elected those in government want them to do, we will come back here again to discuss. So on behalf of the Ford Foundation, I'd like to congratulate my good friend Omano Edigheji for putting together this book, which challenges all of us in the social sector, private sector, and public sector to also take time out from our busy schedule to put down our thoughts. That is how society develops. That's how you build a knowledge society and learn from the mistakes of the past. It's unfortunate that in today's Nigeria, those who govern us do not write anymore. Whereas if you look at the First Republic, everybody committed to writing. But today, the much you see is a harvest or compilation of speeches or photographs and are published and launched without any substance to them. If you look at the book that we are launching today, you will agree with me that it has a substance, and that's the kind of thing we want to see going forward. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Innocent Chukwuma. Excuse me. He is of the Ford Foundation. Something struck me when he said that what we have in Nigeria today is a government of the Godfathers, by the Godfathers, for the Godfathers. What's that sort of government called? I think I should ask him that. Dr. Chukwuma, what's that kind of government called? A government of Godfathers, by Godfathers, for Godfathers. What's the name of that? Godfather crazy. Well, I don't know what it is called, but we know that democracy is a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. The question is whether or not it is delivering what it ought to deliver to the people, what we call today dividends of democracy. Are Nigerians getting that? Why are they not getting that, I think, is the question that this book seeks to answer today. I have to thank you very much for that wonderful goodwill message, which once again contributes to the discussion that we're having here. I understand that I have missed out one very important person in the list of people I acknowledged earlier. Hajia Umi El Rufai was wife of the governor of Kaduna State. Welcome, ma'am, to this event. We also have with us A.U. Mustafa. I wish I could get a very clear name, of the person whom I'm acknowledging. I wish it was not an initial, but I believe you know yourself, A.U. Mustafa. You're very welcome to this event as well. We will be having one more goodwill message from Dr. Yemi Dikpeolu, who is Special Advisor to the President on Economic Matters. I believe he's also going to be giving something very insightful considering where he stands at the moment. Dr. Dikpeolu, if you're here.
Distinguished Senator, Your Excellencies, very distinguished ladies and gentlemen, let me just say that Omano is my very good friend. as my very good friend, he called me to duty, and I had no option but to respond. So I do not have any prepared remarks, except to say that I share with Omano a very great passion for the issues of development, especially the whole issue of the developmental state. And I think his path-breaking book on the democratic developmental state in Africa was one reason why when I was at the Economic Commission for Africa, we invited him to work with us on our book governing development in Africa. And he did acquit himself very much. I'm not an expert on democracy and its impact on development, but I do feel very strongly about the purposes of using the state for the purposes of development. And the first thing I would therefore say is that for a country to start the path of development, it has to reach a political settlement. And that term we owe to Mushtaq Khan of the School of Oriental and African Studies, who had argued very strongly that at the end of the day, it is when the interests of the political elite coincide on the issue of development that you can begin to put development on the front burner. So I would say, I haven't seen Omano's book, I would say that it's essential, and I suspect he will address these issues. So it's essential for us to arrange our polity in such a way that development becomes the raison d'etre for all that we do. And we then put politics aside when development is the issue at stake. And I draw this example from several other countries that have succeeded, be it the Asian tigers or indeed the countries of Southeast Asia. And indeed, to quote from Africa, I think Ethiopia and Rwanda have been qualified as developmental states. So I know Omano will speak about the issues of democracy.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dikpe-Olu. I don't know, I've been told that I don't know if it's true, but I mean, we can check it out if it is or not, but I've been told that in civil society sectors, they don't clap. Is that right? If they do, please do prove them wrong by giving Dr. Dikpe-Olu another round of applause. Well, one more person whom I'm going to be acknowledging, I think, well, Mr. Tijani Abdullahi, you're welcome. I also understand that His Excellency, the South Africa High Commissioner to Nigeria, Tami Miseleko, is also here with us. Your Excellency, you're welcome. Please, may we see him? Oh, great. You're welcome, Your Excellency. Great. We will move now to one reading. We will take a reading to set the pace and set the tone, perhaps to give us a sneak peek as to why we're here. I don't know how many of you have had the privilege of seeing the book. I have. I got an early copy, and there have been areas that have interested me, which I've been able to highlight in the copy that I have received, and I'm hoping to be able to share some of that perhaps when we go into the panel session. But right now, I'd like to invite JJ Omojua, well, that's how he likes to be called, Japheth Omojua, to please share a part of the book that he's read and he's found interesting in this first reading that we'll be taking. Japheth, you have the floor. These days, I don't recognize you. You're wearing agbada and sunshades and, you know, this cap. I don't know.
So, hello. Hello. The MC has been finding it very difficult getting people to be
I don't know if it's the coronavirus or if it's because everybody is socially distanced. We're here and let's celebrate Dr. Omano. I'll be reading from chapter 2. And it says, the development deficit of Nigerian democracy. Democracy, simply put, means development, so that a country in which people go hungry is not a democracy. Professor Christopher Ryan Marbollock, no developmentalism, no democracy. It is important that democracy is analyzed through the lens of developmentalism. For our purposes, developmentalism means the structural transformation of an economy through industrialization and the enhancement of human capabilities, human capital, and ultimately, human well-being. As Brian Keeley, 2016, of the OECD rightly argues, economic success crucially relies on human capital, the knowledge, skills, competencies, and attributes that allow people to contribute to their personal and social well-being, as well as that of their countries. Raising human capital does not only refer to education and training, but also to the improvement of health levels, community involvement, and employment prospects. Focusing on the consistent development and upgrading of human capital at a national level should be a priority. In fact, the expansion of human capabilities is the means and ultimate goal of development. The United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, ECA, defines structural transformation thus: as the change in composition of GDP such that the manufacturing and service sectors have progressively larger contributions than agriculture to growth. Structural transformation also implies a shift in the use of factors of production, such as labor, which is moved from low productivity, that is agriculture, to high productivity sectors, industry, including agro-industry. Therefore, we will analyze the developmentalist project of democracy in Nigeria through its ability to enhance the productive capacities of the society, which involves the structural transformation of the economy. This will require changes in the sectoral composition of industrial, economic output and employment, imports and exports, and the ratio of imports to exports. It will also require the expansion of human capacities which enhance productivity, income, and the assets of the citizens. To draw on Amartya Sen, 1990, Dr. Omano writes the book like a proper academic. So the way you would put 1990 when you're doing a regular academic work is how it is written, compared to how someone like myself who hasn't done a lot of schooling would write it. I just quote the person and keep going. Political freedom enables citizens to enjoy social and economic freedoms that should constitute the central analytical lens to assess democracy, because both development and democracy are mutually reinforcing. In this sense, development includes a process of economic change involving the construction of a more complex and productive economy capable of generating material standard of living. White, 1998, page 20. This in turn legitimizes democracy, as a number of scholars have correctly argued. Evans, 2010, AG, 2005 and 10, Olukoshi, 2011, Matlosa et al., 2008. In closing, as per the part I'm reading, the analysis in this book does not suggest that democracy impedes development. A simple statistical test that uses key indicators of political and civil liberties will show that there is no relationship between democracy and development. I agree. Also, democracy needs to be pursued for its normative values because, amongst others, civil and political rights are essential to upholding and enhancing human dignity. However, anecdotal evidence shows that a democracy is unable to deliver inclusive
or development without democracy. And I must confess one thing, I am a Stalinist in nature. I haven't changed from being a Stalinist. I am a Stalinist and I've become even more Stalinist, not the negative Stalinist, but a Stalinist. And the reason I'm a Stalinist is because I am yet to hear from Edigheji and the people that actually have been working in this area for many years, how actually you're able to have a very qualitative democracy as we understand it, and achieve development at the same time. And I think that's what this topic is actually starting to get us into. I hear people talking about the Asian tigers and the Southeast Asia, but I am actually yet to see a very successful democratic developmental state in the manner in which we are defining it, and I hope it's also defined in the book. But actually, that is what is unique about us in Africa. We are trying to actually show the world that development can have a democratic face, and that democracy can be developmental in its nature, because historically, democracy has been for the few, but for those few, development has come to them at the expense of others. And therefore, they've actually seen themselves as very successful first world countries, developed world, and so on, without actually getting to the bottom of the fact that they developed from the sweat of the Africans and the Caribbeans, as well as other nations that they oppressed in order to actually get that dividend of the so-called democracy they have. We in Africa are trying to say that we are going to have democracy, yes, and we're going to have development without treading on anybody's foot. And that's a tall order. It cannot be expected to be achieved within a short period of time. It took them years and years for them to actually oppress us, exploit our resources in order to call themselves developed. It will take years and years, and will take conversations like this for us to actually say, we are doing it the African way, the way which has no exploitation and which is very democratic and very inclusive, yet developmental at the same time. And I'd like to hear, I'm here to hear really the last part of it. How do we fix the problem that we tend to then emphasize the liberal elements of democracy, which is simply to go to elections every 5 years, without necessarily seeing that there's an interlink between social inclusion and not just voting, and democracy, as well as development. And without social inclusion, there could be no development. It will be individual development, it will be oppressive development, etc., etc. So Edigheji and I and others are still having this conversation. We haven't concluded it. I think I want to see how it's going to actually pan out here. And we want to congratulate Edigheji for continuing this conversation. Now he's talking, the word on top is Nigeria. Before it was South Africa, it was Africa. But I think the conversation is actually going on. Thank you very much.
Your Excellency, Mr. Leko, thank you so much for that. Now, some people are going to say, are we going to be talking about a homegrown democracy? You know how that word was a buzzword at some point, you know, where maybe a few years when we were into the Fourth Republic, people started getting discouraged and were wondering, is this really what democracy is about? Is it bringing what it is that we desire for it to bring? And then we started hearing the word, be patient, we have our own homegrown democracy. Well, I'm looking forward to the panels this afternoon, and I understand they're going to be very interesting, they're going to be very enlightening, they're going to be rousing our minds to think a bit more about where we are, what we're doing, what we have. Is it really delivering what it is that we want it to do of the people, for the youth population? We saw only recently NSAS protest and the aftermath of that. And I'm sure it must have got a lot of us thinking about where we are as a people. Well, not to take too much of your time, ladies and gentlemen, because time is fast spent, we're going to go to panel session 2, if you have your program. And it's going to be anchored by none other by Iobe, who is a human rights activist. Ma'am, you're welcome. I'm also going to let you introduce the people who are going to be on your panel. Okay. As you please, ma'am. Well, please take this way up. Or perhaps I should just go ahead and introduce those who are going to be on your panel. Thank you. Okay. Well, we're going to have Nuhu Ribadu, who is a former chairman of the EFCC. If you're here, sir. You know, now everyone is wearing a mask. You can barely see anyone and recognize them as you ought to. But please, if Nuhu Ribadu is here, would you kindly come forward? We're also supposed to have Mr. Awal Ibrahim Musarraf Sujani. Is he here? Of CISLAC? Oh dear. Mercy Abang, I know, will be joining us from Germany via Zoom. And we also have Dr. Sam Amadi. Dr. Amadi, are you here? Okay. JJ Omojowa, I understand you're going to be joining our panel with or without your democratic shades. Excuse me. And may we also ask Dr. Joe Abba to please join the panel. Baby boy of life. I just heard Messiah Obey saying, Dr. Abba, you're welcome. Good to see you. So they're going to be talking about politics, governance, and the fight against corruption. I understand that a few of the members of the panel are not yet here, and they will be joining. Someone was said to have highlighted Nuhu Ribadu earlier, but it looks like he's disappeared somehow. But he'll be back, I guess. So, Dr. Obey, you have the floor. You have to forgive me. I keep calling everyone here a doctor, maybe because the author is a doctor.
Yes, I was just saying that I'm not a doctor of any kind. I'm not a developmental expert of any kind either. But I do know that Dr. Joe Abba is, and I dare say that Omojua, who I know as an author rather than a doctor, or I'm going to get straight into the discussion. Of course, Omano was very careful in not allowing me to see this book before today, so I cannot talk about it. However, from what was read by JJ, from what the Senator said in his opening remarks, I'm beginning to get some uneasy stirrings of the idea that we should shelve democracy in the interests of development. And I hope that I'm wrong, but in this panel where we're going to talk about, amongst other things, corruption, I would like to start by suggesting that we've actually done the no democracy thing in Nigeria. We've tried it, and what we got was corruption. And the question is democracy the antidote or the remedy to those, to the fact that we've already tried development without democracy? Or is it that because we didn't have democracy, we didn't have the capacity to challenge those who were guiding our development in the wrong direction? So I'm going to start with Dr. Abba And I would ask you to try and push back a little bit on this idea. I was a bit disturbed when an elected representative was making that comment. So, as you are not an elected representative, nor am I, you don't have to worry about the public.
Thank you, ma'am. It so happens that the elected representative is also a development professional, so I know he was pushing an intellectual discourse, and it's great to have the opportunity to comment on that. Thanks and congratulations to my brother and friend Omano for completing this book. It raises a number of important issues, some of which you've alluded to, ma'am. It is, of course, possible to have democracy without development. I don't think there's any argument about that. There are a number of democratic societies that are not developed. It is also possible to have development without democracy. And there are very many examples. China is one. The interesting thing is that while you cannot say that democracy causes development, you can't claim causation, I'm not aware of any developed society that is not practicing democracy. So while you cannot argue causation, the correlation is very clear that developed countries are democratic countries. The interesting thing is, at what point did they embrace democracy? I'm not aware of any developed country that started out as a democratic country from day one. It was either a monarchy or a dictatorship or a theocracy or a military government of some sort. And then it got to a position where it embraced democracy. And like you said, Ma, we've tried non-democratic governments. And I think it was Winston Churchill that said, democracy is the worst form of government, except for every other form of government that has been tried. So yes, democracy can be challenging. Many see it as a destination, but it's actually a journey. And I think it is on the path of that journey that, regardless of the form of government you choose to try, society gets to a point where it starts to demand certain freedoms. And some of those freedoms include the freedom of speech, the freedom to protest. It includes demanding information about how government works. And it is when it starts to demand information about how government works that it starts to demand accountability for those who are leading to basically give account for how they are exercising the power that has either been entrusted on them or that they take. And so when you relate it to the issue of corruption, you find that the democracy that we are practicing and that we are trying to perfect and improve is what is getting us to that stage where we're beginning to ask those questions. We need to have freedom of information. We need to know what the National Assembly is taking. I never say earning, because there's a difference between what you earn and what you take. And so we say we need to know what the National Assembly is taking from our Commonwealth every month. And we need to know that people have declared their assets. And we need to know who is spending money and sharing money during elections and all of those things. And those are the questions that we're asking that is beginning to expose a certain level of corruption that we were otherwise oblivious to in the previous systems of government that we practiced. So under military rule, we all knew that people shipped cash in 53 suitcases and all, but it's always when something happens or when a foreign government exposes the corruption. And then even the ones we knew, we could not say anything about because we're all scared of being killed and simply being shot. So we're getting to that position where democracy is actually aiding the fight against corruption because the first level is we need to have information. Once we have information, we need to demand accountability. Once we're able to demand accountability, then it becomes more difficult to perpetrate the kind of impunity which Nuhu Ribadu says is what we are currently fighting. We're not even fighting corruption yet. It is the impunity we're fighting that you can actually do it and get away with it. That will be my first pushback. Thank you, ma'am.
I'm going to go to Mercy Abang because one of the things that Dr. Abba talked about was the issue of information about what's going on. And of course, the Fourth Estate is a really important, has an important role to play in bringing that information forward. Or does it? Mercy, I hope you can hear me. I hope, can you hear me?
No, it's not clear. I can't hear clearly.
She can't hear me.
Not clear.
It's not clear.
I can hear.
And I can't hear Mercy either. That's for sure. So I think I'm going to direct the question then to JJ Omojua and to ask about the role that information, the media play, particularly in this era of social media, and with social media, the capacity to spread truth or falsehood and the difficulty that we have. And in fact, perhaps the way that governments and their opponents
Thank you.
dress up
Thank you.
facts in order to be able to
Let me just first
win
of all
democratic dividend. You cannot hear me.
I thought you were done with questions.
No, I wasn't.
Can you take it again?
Yeah, my point is, because I had been directing it to Mercy, but since we can't get her, I asked whether you feel that the Fourth Estate is playing its role, particularly in this era where we have media, which is not just the mass and the mainstream media, but also media at our individual control, and the desire of governments or their opponents to present facts in a way, or non-facts in a way, allow them to win the democratic kudos or the votes of the people as and when necessary.
Thank you. I'll start by issuing a disclaimer that I was not supposed to be on this panel. Dr. Omano did ask me to be on the panel, and I said I'd rather reading, but I guess it is what it is. To the question, I think that one of the most important realities and aspects of democracy is information, because after the indoctrination that goes on in the school system, primary school, secondary school especially, the next part of indoctrinating the masses is what they consume. And it goes to show how government, especially autocratic governments, the first thing they go for is the media. And even today, the ones that are not autocratic, the systems that are not autocratic, the billionaires, the political billionaires and the conventional billionaires go out of their way to find a way to control the media. And today, for instance, we're having a conversation on whether there's going to be social media regulation or no social media regulation. So it goes without saying that the media, the mass media in all its forms today, the conventional media, new media space, if you control them, you control the masses. It then means that if you really want to preserve democracy, you must have that place as free and as open as possible. I really do not think that you can have a truly democratic society if there is a form of control of what people are able to consume. I think, for instance, a government can decide to have its own media platform. I think that an opposition can decide to have its own media platform. I think that obviously independent media platforms should be allowed, but I think at no time should people have to be forced to have to depend on one. At no time should, for instance, I thought it was a bad idea that at a time when the global media was freely reporting what was happening in Nigeria with respect to NSAS, Nigeria's regulatory body, was it the NBC, was busy challenging Arise and AIT and one other platform. I thought that was unfortunate. I personally think that compared to where we were in 1999, even though it's difficult for Nigerians to admit progress, I personally think that we've actually moved forward on many fronts. But I do think that that's not enough. We have to continue to question how we are led. We have to continue to question our values. When you pay attention to democracy all around the world, especially on the continent, in the 90s, you had outright dictators. Today, you have dictators that are using elections to legitimize themselves. I'll probably call countries, but I don't think it's necessary because we have diplomatic people here. They're using elections to legitimize themselves, making it look like democracy is defined in elections, making it look like once you're able to say that you have a constitution, then it's okay to do whatever you like, making it look like a president who spent 2 terms already, who probably came in having another president removed because they were going to do something the wrong way. Now they are in and they've spent 2 terms and now they're trying to force another term on the people, claiming that there was a democratic process. That's happened at least already somewhere in West Africa. That's already happening again in another place in West Africa. If you look at East Africa, it's burning because, again, another president is trying to force his way in. And the first place they attack is the media. So it really goes without saying. And I think that anyone who is committed to democracy, as much as anything else, you must be committed to a free media space. Then I should also conclude by saying it even gets even more expensive as we go along. Too many times people blame Nigerian journalists, maybe some foreign journalists from CNN or BBC or Al Jazeera or DW. They do some reports, they go to Maiduguri or go to Yola and do some extraordinary reports, and people are always like knocking their Nigerian counterparts. And the question is, do these Nigerian journalists have insurance? If something happens to them, does anything good happen to their family after that? What's the cost of the life of the Nigerian journalists? The other thing is, what's their welfare? Are they paid on time? There are people that have said that there are media platforms in Nigeria where they are told that your ID card is your means of existence. Just do whatever you can do with it. So when we pay attention to this space, we should be careful not just to look at what government is doing right or not doing right. We must also look at the private space. How are people running these private institutions? But ultimately, I just conclude by saying that the essence of democracy is that people have a choice, whether it's the choice to choose who they elect, whether it's the choice to choose what platforms they listen to, and also inclusion. And what's inclusion? Where you don't have a National Assembly that's never had 10% ever since 1999. We've never had 10% representation in terms of women in a National Assembly. That puts a big question mark on your democracy. When you don't have a democracy where people are making a law for the future, and in that room, less than 10% of them are less than 40. I think these are the kind of questions we need to start answering, and these are the kind of things that we need to start putting in the media. And ultimately, democracy will never be perfect in a day. It's about what we do every day, the conversations we have, and the new laws and the new ways of making them happen. We shouldn't just complain. We should find ways of participating, whether in or out of government. Thank you.
Okay, I welcome Rafsanjani to the panel, but I'm going to try again with Mercy Abang. And if I appear to be shouting, please forgive me. But I hope that Mercy can hear me.
Yes, a bit. Yes, a bit. I can.
Okay, great. So it's actually been my privilege this year to look at many entries for an investigative journalism prize. And what strikes me is the extent to which Nigerian journalists have gone all over the country, post so many things that those in power, I often feel that those in power should be forced to read all the entries, whether they win prizes or not, because of the way that they expose some of the things that may not make headlines in Nigeria. And I wonder whether you feel that the role of the media in bringing about both democracy and development are contradictory, or whether the media itself is part of the problem because the trust deficit that the government suffers from is also beginning to affect the Nigerian media as well.
Thank you, Ayo, for the question. I got a bit of what you said. I completely do agree with your last take about the media and reportage. You cannot completely absolve the journalists from the society, if we're being honest, right? But over the years, we can say for a fact that with the limitations that journalists in Nigeria have had to work with, you know, we've seen journalists go over and above just to tell the stories, just to dig deeper, and to bring the news about growth and development of the country. However, again, we need to start shifting the focus from what is always wrong to what is working and to what can work. Because sometimes for all of us that went to journalism schools, they always tell you the bad news is the news. But I think that to be able to grow it for a country that is developing, for us to prosper as a nation, we need to start looking at what is working and talk more about what is working and project what can possibly work beyond just the negative storytelling. Because we have seen that with the internet and social media, more of this negative storytelling also has its own long-term implications for a country that is developing like Nigeria. But I would say that we have also been able to tell stories that are not even comfortable. Fisayo Oshoyombo is one of those journalists that I'll probably point out to that takes the risk to ask questions, which is why I'll probably go back to the topic of the book that says, I would argue that democracy does not necessarily guarantee development, because we can point to military regimes that, you know, that had lots and lots of development. What democracy guarantees is the freedom to be able to ask for open governments that allows for more development, that allows for freedom for people to be able to question systems, that allows for people to probe and act. There's growth, there's development. We can actually do better. But with what we have right now, I would probably give, you know, the Nigerian journalists a pass mark. Because if you go around newsrooms across the country, you ask questions, you realize that the systems that works for, I'm not saying we should just jump and start, you know, paying staff salaries like CNN does, but even stories about government that's not paid ASUS university workers, but we have also not been able to tell the stories of journalists that are not being paid. Perhaps we also need to beam that searchlight to have the welfare of journalists. That way it helps in better storytelling, it helps in training for the journalists to look at stories, to ask questions, because even as citizens, we also deserve to answer questions, and it is the role of journalists to be able to point that also. I'm not sure I have responded to your questions, but a bit of what I just had to react to something. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And you did respond to part of my question, yes. As I said, we we welcome Rafsanjani of CISLAC. And Rafsanjani, I don't know the extent to which you have been able to follow the discussion, or whether you've been able to read Omano's book. But the issue is, as what it says on the tin, democracy without development. how to fix it. And the question is, are we forced to have a choice? On the one hand, we've seen, as His Excellency pointed out, many of those who are lecturing us on democracy are very silent about their origins as non-democratic states and exploitative states. On the other hand, we in Nigeria, we have seen dictatorship. Did we develop during that period, or was it in some showcase places and the hinterland was left unaddressed? And I wonder whether you, as somebody who has been concerned in the struggle against corruption, can tell us, why do we have to make a choice? And if we don't have to make a choice, and if you haven't read the solutions that we understand Dr. Edigheji has in his book, if you haven't read those solutions, what is it that we are going to do that will get us out of this either-or idea, or that we should just suspend our democratic rights? Rasanjan Sam, Dr. Sam Amadi, who has also arrived, and his 10 minutes was indeed 10 minutes. And please, your views.
Thank you very much, and let me express or render my apology for coming a bit late. I think it is important to understand that democracy is not a license for looting, mismanagement, embezzlement, corruption generally. Democracy is used by some people to be just an avenue for democratization of corruption and looting in Nigeria. And there's no way you can have any development when corruption is the order of the day. At local, state, and national level, apparently, there's a huge campaign for siphoning public taxpayers' money. There's no way you can achieve any development and consolidate democracy. Now, when you look at the cost or the consequences of corruption, it's very obvious. We have seen collapse of industrialization. We have seen collapse, of ethical, moral value. We have also seen total collapse of even development generally, because the resources that is meant to develop the nation has been on a regular basis siphoned. So therefore, there's no way you can achieve really true democracy when there's a struggle and scrambling of public taxpayers' money. Governance has to manner in which we operate. As a result of corruption, you can see the intensity of violence and conflict that is taking over the country. Because we spend huge amounts of money, even in terms of responding to the insecurity, but because this money is not properly applied, we are spending these billions and billions, yet we are waking up every day with a new form of insecurity, a new form of violence. Therefore, there's no way you can actually prosper. There's no way democracy can prosper. There's no way we can have the desired development if corruption in governance, corruption in the security sector. We spend a lot of money in the name of security boards, yet we don't really see, insecurity being tackled as a result of that huge amount of money we spend, even on the money that is called, security boards. We published a report showing how insecurity or security boards had actually not helped, in terms of dealing with fundamental of insecurity in this country. We have also seen how poverty has deepened because of corruption, because when the resources that is meant to provide infrastructure that will enable people to even generate jobs by themselves, like electricity and water and road infrastructure, if those things are not there, there's no way you can actually address unemployment and poverty. Of this deliberate and conscious siphoning of public taxpayers, some people who have been entrusted with that. Governance has to change in the way it is being conceived and being practiced in Nigeria for us on democracy, and then be able to have the desired development. Just building that is development. Actually, development is the ability to and be able to produce projects. So the industrialization has to be at the key center in terms of even reviving our economy. Right now, we do not even have economic management team. So one of the things that I think, there are some suggestions that I put forward in which we can actually deal with the issues that we're talking about. One of it is that I think a lot of people have stolen public taxpayers' money, and government covered from the yesterday looters must be judiciously used for the victims of corruption, which is not happening now. Secondly, we need to ensure that we increase coordination among the anti-corruption agencies. There's too much duplication of effort by various anti-corruption agencies. EFCC, for example, is recovering. ICPC is recovering. Code of Conduct is recovering. Police is recovering. Everybody is recovering. No coordination, no central data where you can see this harmonized, recovered asset. We cannot continue that way. Again, I think it is also important that organizations, the government organizations that are doing this are supposed to be very transparent so that they can serve as exemplary leaders or exemplary organization that others can also follow. We have so many important legislation in this country that are totally disregarded. Everybody knows that one of the major areas where corruption happens is in the procurement. And that is why we work very hard in the past to ensure that we have the public procurement law. This public procurement law is there, but totally not being adhered to by various ministries and parastatals. In fact, even the council itself that is supposed to ensure the compliance of that law is not being inaugurated or appointed. There's no way you can be fighting corruption and the corruption in the procurement is not addressed, because most of the stealing actually is done through procurement. Again, you also have the freedom of information that is supposed to help ensure information, access to information. Many of the government agencies are not complying with that. You have fiscal responsibility law that is supposed to ensure that there's a prudent management of our resources. This law is not also adhered to. I can go on. Fundamentally, when you shrinking and emasculate the civil space, there's no way democracy and development and even the fight against corruption can work. So there's need for the government to ensure that the civil space that is being shrinking is actually allowed to function, because democracy only functions when you have effective civil space to contribute to the governance. Now, when you emasculate the civil space, then you are actually doing a lot of damage for the democracy itself and good governance. Again, I want to also say that respect for the court order is also another fundamental way in which we can improve in our governance and corruption. When you continue to flagrantly disregard court order, there's no way you can actually say that you are actually even fighting corruption and that governance will work. There are quite a number of issues that I would have loved to share, but I know that other speakers are there, so I don't want to manipulate the space. But I believe that this is a conversation that we should continue to do, but there's need for the Nigerian official and the Nigerian people to rethink on what democracy and development entail, because there's no way you can marry corruption, you can marry democracy with corruption. It's not possible. You cannot achieve nothing. So it is important that the electorate begin to understand why they need to shun people who have unexplained wealth. We have been doing a lot of things to get Nigeria to recover its money. I can tell you that Nigerian government is not even taking advantage of the space that we do. For example, I was invited by the French Parliament to discuss how to recover back Nigerian money. Till today, the European Parliament, they passed a resolution for them to return Nigeria and other African assets. Nobody from Nigeria has gone there. The State Department, as a civil society, to canvass and insist that Nigerian assets should be returned. And part of the benefit is what we are seeing today. But we are not even asking for any acknowledgement. What we are asking is that when the money comes, let them put it into a better use so that Nigerians can appreciate the importance of not taking away their resources. But there's no sanction, there's no any, a lesson for people who are doing that. As long as you are loyal to somebody that is in power, you are covered, you are okay. This cannot go, and that will not be the best way to deal with the, corruption and governance in Nigeria. Thank you.
Thank you. As I said, Dr. Sam Amadi has arrived. And Dr. Amadi, you were an appointee of a democratically elected government. And it does as though, even though we talk about our love for democracy and we want democratic governance, as soon as people who come with credentials and try to actually get into governance and improve it, then assumptions are made, mud is thrown, particularly if there is a lack of immediate success in the endeavors to which they have been appointed. And I wonder whether you can identify for us what it means to be actually inside government. Do you think that it is important for those who have been on the outside criticizing to go inside and see what it's like? Or do you think that there's a danger, which I'm sure you definitely resisted in any event, but do you think that there is a danger that by going into government, you get sucked into the ways of politics, and therefore you cease to be devoted towards good governance and development and start to take a more relaxed attitude to matters of corruption?
Okay, thank you very much. I think very powerful, relevant, and conflicting question, but very important. I think it's both ways. I think it's good. I think it's also very dangerous. It is good because being inside provides practical framework to understand what you are dealing with outside. It's very seductive to think that maybe if you are inside, you will be much more equipped, especially those who are in advocacy. So you could have the naive idea that once you are in, you will see those problems, then it will improve your knowledge of the problem and solution. At the same time, going in can also lead to both despair, in the sense that you come out and not willing or not being eager or optimistic of change because you failed, quote unquote, in your first, or it could also lead to corruption, in the sense in which you lose a sense of outrage and also any passion for change because you become part of them, as they say. From my own experience, okay, so I would say the first thing is going in, you should be prepared before you even go in, because passion and commitment for public good and understanding about the crisis of public governance are different things. So people can be passionate, well-meaning, but clueless about the real nature of the problem of the public sector. So part of going in should be first preparing yourself to understand beyond the manifestation of this crisis. For example, we talk about poverty, we talk about corruption. You don't need to have any special knowledge to see the effect of corruption. You know when you see it. But then you need some training, understanding, to know how it works. So if you are prepared, it helps you both to know the limitation of what you can do and actually the extent of the good you can do. So it goes two ways. In some aspect, you're going to fail in some aspects. So when you have that knowledge, that realism, it creates a sense of balance. You go in there, you succeed, you fail, you still come out smoking because you did not delude yourself that you are going to solve the problem. That's very important. The second thing is also to know what they're dealing with. I went to speak to a church program where they said we should talk about, should Christians join into politics, to encourage them to go to politics. And I said, first is, you have to recognize that politics is a dark art. Government is actually demonic, for the simple reason that government is about power. Wherever there's power, there is attraction for all kinds of evil. So going to government in the sense that, look, you're going to deal with something that is not necessarily good in itself, something that has capacity for bad, helps you to understand that this is a dangerous terrain. Okay, so practically, when I was in government, I remember incidents where in the villa or maybe cabinet meeting or provincial task force meeting, and I would be speaking like a human rights person. And they would say, Sam, you're no longer there, you're with us. A particular chief of staff says, Sam, they say you are eating with us, stop talking as if you're outside. So the first thing is that you feel like you're not part of them. And that's the first seduction. But once you can maintain the fact that, and I used to tell them, I said, look, there are different modes of government. Government is not one side, so it doesn't mean that because this is how government works. You can bring a contra version of how government should work. One of my commissioners is here when we were NEC. When we brought the code of conduct for NEC, he was ahead of. And when we say people should submit for gifts should be submitted and declared, people say, what are you talking about? It took us about 3-4 months of negotiation before we agreed to sign off the code of conduct. So the sense that you are going to work hard to even convince those working with you, I made a lot of mistakes. The assumption that because you meant well, everybody will buy it. Some people mean well as well, but they read what you are doing in a different way. So the skill to bring everybody to see why that good thing is in public good is the kind of skills that you don't necessarily have because you're a human rights actor. So I think we should have a sense of balance. There are human rights activists who do well in government because they have the training and the temperament to manage complexities and lack of clarity. There are human rights persons who would not do well because they don't have that temperament to deal with complexities. To use the language of religious people, to be of the word, not of the world. To sit with cabinet members and still be like an outsider, proposing that looks very radical and which will not be accepted the first day, second day, third day, but maybe fifth, sixth day, they accept it, that is harmless. So to conclude, I would say that, look, I don't regret being in government. I think I would like to be in government on and off and on and off and on and off, if it's possible. Secondly, I think that any person who is serious about public policy change should see government as a place he or she can go, move out and move in. What may be dangerous for some of us is taking government as a residence. You know, you forget where you're coming from. And so one of my colleagues said, Sam, it's like you're going back to your people. I said, but yeah, that's where I come from. So you go back, you move out. The president of Open Society, I said he's probably going to Biden team. But he made a point. He says he wants to go to politics because to continue the advocacy and the ideas he's pursuing. That's how I see activists in government. To use politics as a bigger canvas to push for those reforms and be willing to accept defeat. And also be willing to accept your own contamination and be willing to purge yourself for another role. That's the way I look at it. Thank you.
The reason why I particularly asked Sam that question is because when we talk about democracy and development, it's as if we think that democracy is going to be of somewhere else. It's just going to land, but that everybody who actually has to be part of the democracy, that somehow we're going to have democracy without Democrats, and anybody that goes into the democratic struggle and is therefore is automatically not to be considered part of the good part of the human race. So I'm going to throw it open to to those who have come to assist Omano in launching his book. I say that because I've also received some concern about the gap between the discussion we're having and whether we are actually, let me put it, whether we are focusing on the issue of governance and the fight against corruption, because as you know, we had 2 panels and ours is supposed to focus on the fight against corruption. And so I'd like to ask anybody to put a point. Can we have politics without, can we have democracy without politics? And if we must have politics, must we have politicians? And how do we, as Sam has been trying to, had grappled with, how do we achieve the marriage between what the politicians want, what the Democrats, who are not necessarily politicians, want, but in the interests of development? Any takers, or any other subjects that you might care to mention? Otherwise, I will let... Thank you.
Once again, good afternoon to all. My name is Engineer Ahmed Munir, and I'm from Kaduna State. And basically, I just scribbled some thoughts based on the discussions above. I'll start with congratulating Dr. Omano on a book well written for an auspicious moment at the right time. And I'll start with mentioning the title, Nigeria, Democracy Without Development, How to Fix It. And then probably towards the end, I'll tweak it. Development, the classic case of which comes first, the egg or the hen. We all agree democracy in Nigeria is here to stay. The question remains whether we shall continue to practice an individualism democratic system or collectivism democratic system. Democracy is a moving train, but without guardrail, we get a train wreck. So what principally constitutes this guardrail? I stand to be corrected, and of course, this is where I require your input. The answer to that is the rule of law. Our laws in the present-day reality are obsolete, be it our civil, criminal, human rights law, industrial laws, etc. The rule of law is critical for both democracy and development. We still have laws in our books that are rooted in colonial times. Democracy without development is an essential topic. However, away from dissecting Nigeria, democracy without the rule of law, how to fix it. Thank you.
Do I have any other comments from the floor? Okay, then in that case, I'm going to turn back to my panelists, and I'm just going to go in a straight line before I come back and shout at poor Mercy so that she can hear me. But, I mean, Rafsanjani talked about laws for procurement, various things that are done, freedom of information, certain things that are supposed to assist us in having not just a government, but also an open government and one that abides by the rules. Can we get that if we don't have accountability, which to my mind, and I would suggest, is a key element of democracy, that they will have the laws and not necessarily abide by them?
I don't think we can get that without accountability. And I think that also one of the failings of our fight against corruption is that it's not built on accountability and trust. You already made a reference to that. And I do think that in the midst of all Nigeria's problems, whether PDP or APC, Nigeria has actually been able to show some level of incremental change, in the sense that you can have somebody in EFCC do an extraordinary job, and then somebody replaces the person and the person doesn't do well. Or you can have 1 or 2 or 3 governors actually do make change happen in their spaces. Or you can have a Joe Abba in a particular government department or some other good person in another government department make those change happen. Whether for transparency and accountability or the fight against corruption or for development, what Nigeria needs, especially because of the depth of Nigeria's problems, not least the number of people that are poor, is discontinuous change. Because we cannot afford to go at the pace that we're going, because at this pace we would need 100 years. Without having new people get into poverty, at this pace we would need 100 years to lift people out of poverty. So what we would need to have is this continuous change whereby we overhaul the entire system, whereby we don't depend on individuals to make change happen, we depend on the system. So whoever is EFCC chairman, you can trust the EFCC to by and large work. Whoever is the governor of whatever state in America, whatever mad person they have as president, they deliver their democracy. That's the kind of reality we have to aspire to. I appreciate the fact that our democracy is 20 years old. In the reality of a country, that's like 2 years old, maybe even less. So, but the thing is, if we don't channel the idealism that we want, that we desire, we're not going to get there. And in my opinion, what we must continue to ask for is an overhauling of what we currently have. Transparency, accountability, as much as we go for fighting corruption in the conventional way that we're doing it. Thank you.
Well, we only have a very short time, and I do want to hear from Dr. Joe Abba again. I'm afraid that Sam and Rafsanjani, you came late, so. But Dr. Joe, on this issue, we have the rules. Why do we need to have a democracy? Anybody can enforce the rules and get to development.
It is clear that in no system are rules enough to order the way that society functions. There are many other intervening things. There are things that are unwritten. There are rules that are informal. There are those that are on paper. The truth is that when you talk about public corruption, to my mind, the main issue is a lack of sincerity. We have somebody that graduates with a master's degree. He works for 27 years, becomes a director. His take-home pay is 270,000 naira a month. That is his take-home pay. He's a director in the Federal Civil Service. The people in his village expect certain things from somebody of that status. You are a director general like I was or Sam was, and somebody who has spent 15 years in the service, who earns, I don't know, 120,000 naira, comes to you to say, my wife is having a cesarean operation. If she doesn't have it, she will die. I don't have the money. And it comes to you as DG, your own salary is 895,000, which actually is what our senators should earn. That is what is approved. Everything else they take. So they come to you and say, I need 250,000 to save my wife's life. You yourself don't have it because your family members and your town union in Abuja have held a meeting and said, Joe Abba is not performing. And you know what they mean when they say he's not performing. So you yourself don't have the money to give him. What do you say to him? Okay, go and put up something. Say you're going for some training. I'll approve it. And you say that, and when you do that, it's actually corruption. But what choice do you have? As a human being, what choice do you have? There's no social safety net. This person cannot go to a public hospital and get the kind of care that his family needs. What do you do in that kind of situation? And so we sit there pontificating at civil servants and say, oh, you should do this, you should do that, you shouldn't do this, or you shouldn't do that. And they look at their own jobs and look at the jobs of those of others who tend to be shown on television sleeping. And they ask themselves, what does this person do to deserve what they get paid compared to what I do? Is their job more difficult than mine? And so what do? They set up gate posts to frustrate the public and take what they can, because everybody else is. And we don't have the discipline to say, look, we cannot afford to pay everybody well. So we're going to ask some people to go. And we're going to get people who can actually do this job well, and we will pay them well. But we are too afraid of the unions. We are too afraid of being accused of not having a human face. And so we continue this system which self-perpetuates, and we are then surprised that corruption is not going down. So I always say that the day we want to fix our public service is the day that our politicians decide to fix our public service. Everything else, we're simply making the victims as the accused. And I don't think that will take us anywhere. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank the panelists for some of the insights. I particularly think that the idea of knowing what it's actually like, what it's like at the cutting face, is an important aspect of when we have these panels, when we read these books. This book is written by Dr. Edigheji from a perspective of somebody who is working in government and seeing what it's really like. So while I would recommend it, I want to thank the panelists, and particularly I want to thank the absent Mercy for her contribution, and hand back over to the Master of Ceremonies.
Thank you most kindly, Ms. Ayobe, for that panel. I thank everyone on that particular panel as well. I think that you've done a yeoman's job. Once more, can we give a round of applause? We also thank those who joined online. Oh, please, if you may, just before we go, would the panelists and the moderator kindly come forward? Let's quickly take a picture just before. Please, please, please. Please, let's quickly take a picture with the author. Let's do this in about 5 minutes. Right here, please. Now, while that is going on, a few people joined us. The session was going on, and I'll have to quickly acknowledge them. We have in our midst Lamido Balarabe, who is the second gentleman. He is the husband of the Deputy Governor of Kaduna State. Sir, you're welcome. We also have with us Hajia Aisha El Rufai, who is also wife to the Governor of Kaduna State. We also have in our midst Mrs. Miriam Owais, a special advisor to the President. Ma'am, you're welcome. We see you. We acknowledge you. And shortly after, while that is going on, I'll be calling up the panel for the second session. It was supposed to be the first one, but now it is the second one as a result of some of our VIPs not being able to make it. I'm going to invite very quickly to the stage Senator Olubunmi Adetumbi, who is representing Dr. Kayode Fayemi, Governor of Ekiti State. Senator, please. I'm also going to be calling up Professor Patu Tome. Prof, we have to thank you for your patience. You were here way before anyone, and you're supposed to be on the first panel, but we have to thank you for your patience. Hafsat Abiola Costello, founder of for Democracy, will be joining us from Brussels. I don't know if she's online yet, is she? Oh dear, my apologies. Asia. I'm going to recognize Asia El Rufai, who is wife to the governor of Kaduna State. Do forgive my mispronouncing your name earlier, ma'am. I also see here former deputy governor of Kaduna State, Balabantex. You're welcome, sir. So, gentlemen and lady, yeah, this is okay. Ladies and gentlemen, if we may be quickly seated. We're about to start the second session. Ladies and gentlemen, may we have your attention, please? Thank you very much. Prof, we have to thank you once again for your patience. Professor, I beg your pardon, Senator Adebumi Olutumbi, thank you so much for staying with us on this particular session. I look forward to the insights that we will have in this session. We're talking about political parties. Let me quickly get that straight. Building political systems and promoting internal party democracy to achieve inclusive development. Now, I quickly took up the opportunity to check up what political parties are. And a quick Google search will tell you that 70 political parties, and that was a problem for INEC. They had to set up some rules. But after that, they have been deregistered. Some political parties have been deregistered, and I think they've been brought down to a number of about, say, 40 or thereabouts. I'm not certain how many we have now. But I also still know that some political parties are contesting that in court and, questioning the powers of INEC to register. I'm asking, today, if we look at the definition of what political parties are or what they're supposed to be, can we say we have political parties in Nigeria? Prof, I'll pass that to you first.
Well, thank you very much. I think that, first of all, let me congratulate Mano for this effort. And I think it's a very important conversation that we're having today. When Innocent Chukwuma spoke and gave his opening remarks, I turned to Dr. Tive, who was sitting by me, and said, we can go home, because he had summarized everything. First of all, I don't think we have political parties in Nigeria. I belong to one, but I can't call it a political party. It's a contraption of entrepreneurs looking to get power to use for whatever pleases them. So the point of the matter is that we missed it in 1999, exactly the way Innocent introduced the matter. And because we missed it in 1999, political parties, or what we call political parties, fail in a fundamental way to deal with their very reason for being in the Nigerian context. I actually gave a lecture several years ago on political parties, just before the APC was founded. It was the Leadership newspaper's annual lecture. If you go back to the idea of political parties and the defining texts on this subject, a 1911 book by Roberto Michels titled Political Parties. Yes, it is true that there is a tendency in political parties to be oligarchic, and that was the essence, When, as political science students, you hear people running around saying, he who says organization says oligarchy. There's a tendency towards oligarchy. But if they are anywhere near what you try to define, their essence is in defining what they stand for, then looking for talent very early, socializing this talent into those ideas and exposing them to opportunities to implement those ideas. But that never happened with our political parties starting from 1999. I know personal effort that I made to influence at least one political party to go down that track. Once the entrepreneurs had gotten together, had registered this thing, and owned this property, they just decided, many of them looked for their T-boy or whoever to just put anywhere so that, you know, they can do as they pleased or wanted in those organizations. So, the central thing about somebody who represents you is the agency function. He's your agent. He's supposed to help pull together what your best interest is and interpret policy to reflect your interest. But you see that Nigerian political parties don't do that. They can't even articulate the interests of their members, not to talk of the interest of the people. So we have a system that becomes exactly what Innocent has talked about and drives only the interest of those who own this contraption, as it were, and it therefore lacks legitimacy. The problem of Nigerian political crisis, or the crisis of Nigerian politics right now, is there's a major lack of legitimacy for the political system, for the political parties. When my dear friend, the distinguished senator, started, I'm worried about, you know, can we have democracy and development? And more or less was hinting, maybe you have to develop first before you have development. I was frightened. As Ayo said, I was frightened. Why was I frightened? Let's look at contemporary history. Oftentimes we all look to South Korea and look at what Park did. We look to Singapore and we assume that Lee was a dictator more or less. And we look at Turkey and we look at Ataturk and we see some, you know, transformative thing in the dictator, in the strong man. But the truth is that it is the institutions that emerge that really ensure steady, inclusive development. And even if you take our own history as example, under colonial administration, the strong man used his powers to extract and export to the metropole, like the ambassador was saying, and that's how they got rich. Once we came to self-government, and I often go back to Pius Okibo and his book, Nigerian Public Accounts. He makes a point, which I used to tease MBA students. By the time we went to self-rule, the regional marketing boards, Northern Nigeria, Eastern Nigeria, Western, had huge reserves. Between 1957 and 1960, those reserves disappeared. And so when I said to the MBA students, what do you think happened to the money? They chopped the money, which is not true. What happened was that colonial regime was not interested in development. Was not interested, it just put the basics in place to ensure that stability for extraction and export. Once elected Nigerian representatives who were trying to pursue a democratic agenda were in place, they wanted to industrialize the country. They wanted all these developments, and they used those resources to begin to execute the Ikeja industrial estate, to which Okpara responded with the Aba and Port Harcourt, to which the Sadawana responded with Kakuri. And this process brought about a surge in development in the country. Robert Melson and Howard Wolpe have written very well about this in challenging the idea that tribalism was what created problems in Nigeria. They in fact argued that this was competitive communalism. Mainly ethnic-based kinds of political organizations trying to outcompete one another for who would most bring progress to their people.
I'm going to try and bring it back to political parties.
Yes.
Because I think that's where we started from.
Those happen in political parties.
Yes.
The Action Group, the NCNC, the NPC, with their clear ways of bringing progress to their people.
Well, you have argued today that we do not have political parties. We just have
Currently.
entrepreneurs. I do not know if Senator Adetumbi will agree with you, because he is a staunch member of a political party. I think you have remained in your political party for as long as you've been there. Yes, there are people who have moved from one party to another, but largely he's been loyal to his party. Would you say that you're there because you believe with whom you're in the party, you all have like minds and you're sharing ideology, and you're hoping now that you are in to be able to implement some of the things that you have promised the people?
I think I sometimes disagree when you have a blanket statement of something does not exist, simply because you don't agree with the form that it exists. And I also, as an economist, I tend to look at the demand and supply side of things. To think that institutions of their benevolence to do what is right for society, I think is expecting too much. The Englishman says, turkey don't work for Christmas, which means for political parties to become public institutions that delivers dividends of democracy and development to the people, there has to be a demand side that puts political parties on their toes to do what is required of them, even when ordinarily the tendency is for them not to do it. Okay? Because the definition says a political party is a gathering of common interest holders who believe in the pursuit of power to pursue a purpose. And when the pursuit of purpose that is public good is not happening in sufficient quantum, that is why you have society to put such institutions back on track. This is what we expect of you, and that's why you have electoral cycles and various instruments within the political space to bring political parties and their governments into question. Let me get practical here. We run a federation made up of a federal government, 36 state governments, and 774 local governments. I think one of the problems we have that has made development so elusive to us, if you take the social statistics of this country, poverty in the area of education and health, access to common basic livelihood services, which is the simplest, most basic function of government. We notice that majority of Nigerians have no access. And when there is access, maybe ability to afford is not also there. The question is, what is the role of government? I think we have an exaggerated view, in my opinion, of what constitutes the role of a federal government in a federation. The aggregate of Nigeria's performance as a nation, whether social or economic, is contributed by the 36 states and 774 local government. Yes.
Are you suggesting that there is no demand side, and that's why political parties are what they are today?
In every social space, there is always expectation from public institutions to perform certain roles. And I'm saying, when those expectations are unmet, society has a role. Media, society organizations, faith-based organizations, to demand from government and public institutions their responsibility, whether constitutional, social, or economic responsibility to the people.
But this is about political parties and how we can make them. I know, Prof, you want to respond to that. Well, quickly, this is about political parties and making them more inclusive. Now, oftentimes, even within political parties, when things go wrong, when the party is going against its own manifesto or going against its own constitution, and party members are trying to call the party to order, it's a problem. I mean, even when the party maybe, disgruntled or aggrieved party members decide, look, we can go and settle this in court, it becomes another problem, because oftentimes they will have a clause in the constitution of the party that would say, their internal affairs of the party. And even I, as a journalist, I've had an experience where political party matters. And you will get calls from political party members saying, it is our party affair, it is a family affair, leave it alone. Do you think that with that kind of stance, or with holding a particular kind of stance, we will ever progress as a people?
Well, we also have to agree that the development of political parties as public institutions is always work in progress, and it's like trying to hit a moving target. In other words, when in every successive successive cycle of elections, the party has an opportunity to self-correct because people have choices to make. And this is the way democracy works. Within a 4-year term of office, for example, it is practically impossible for you to change a political party in government by democratic means. And it is in self-interest for political parties within those 4 years to see how they can reinvent themselves, recreate themselves.
By Douglas North in the book Institutional Change and Economic Performance. And essentially, it is evolutionary in its nature. Interested parties contesting then reach to a point where boundaries begin to emerge. And those boundaries enable choice. Now, what happens in our situation is that political parties actually act to prevent that evolution. Political parties act to prevent conversation. I've been involved from the very beginning. I know how this has happened. And the process essentially then damages the possibilities of those institutions that will enable that change next cycle. Ordinarily, if that happened, if we got into a conversation, what the political party should encourage, debate within its ranks to determine how we go forward, then you can expect that what you're saying will happen. But what happens is that the system deliberately prevents that engagement. So you cannot have an institution evolving in that sense. What you then get to is either the system busts or some people forcibly hold it together. And then what JJ was talking about, this continuous change. And this continuous change is very traumatic in its nature. And that's not what you probably do need. But if you prevent this kind of conversation, which political parties exist to encourage within its own ranks, and it doesn't happen, then this continuous change becomes inevitable and the system can rupture. And that's really what the challenge is for Nigeria. Right now, we've got a situation where there isn't capacity, leadership capacity, in many political parties in Nigeria. The choice of people who are going to public office is usually the lowest common denominator and is not able to offer leadership to the country. And so the system is like being pulled down and waiting for a blowout. So we need to build real political parties that allow for that process to get the brightest. Look, by the time you are in college, even South Africa does such a much better job of that. I know Omano will talk about ANC meetings. I'm frequently in South Africa. They are so much better organized in engaging up to the grassroots involvement, discussing policy at those levels. It doesn't happen in Nigeria. I do not know any policy of government in Nigeria that party members at a ward level have discussed. I don't know of any. And I'm involved in the system. But they do that in South Africa. The ANC people at those ward levels engage in those conversations. So we've not managed to create those systems. So it's...
Some people say that we had a chance. I do know that when the APC was being formed in, sometime before 2015, people thought things were going to be slightly different or a bit different. Why do you think, because it will not be in their own interest for political parties to bust, why do you think that they prevent, as you rightly said, or as you pointed out, why do they block that avenue that could actually lead to their own evolution? Isn't it in their own,
Just as Innocent Shukuma pointed out, the way we went about it, you needed people who had resources to pull this together. Once they pulled it together, it was their business. And, a company is not a democracy. When the boss says, this is the way I want my company run, you better run it the way he wants it run. It might have goals that can do good to society, but a company is not a democracy. In the same sense, those who owned the political parties in Nigeria try to run them like private companies. And that is the fundamental problem that has prevented the evolution of political parties in Nigeria.
I don't
think we can afford to be look at the situation in this country from the point of view of hopelessness.
It's not hopeless. It's very redeemable.
Just a minute.
Yes.
We don't have to allow despair to set in. In every human experience, things evolve over time, especially when there is consistency of a critical mass of believers at conviction level about what needs to be done correctly, and they refuse to drop the ball. I cite myself as an example. I came into politics from profession. I met work in this country over 30 years before I came into politics in 2000. And I wanted to become. I did not become a senator until year 2011. And I never changed party for once. I have been through elections where I didn't get a ballot paper. I didn't quit. I retained that energy to continue to make change. And here am I today. And when I got into parliament, I had a vision of what I wanted to do. And that informed my contribution. I'm just describing that if, as individuals, we're able to hold space and vision and energy and tenacity in the direction of our conviction, it is that we're able to establish a critical mass of believers in improving the system rather than giving up on that system. Because the system cannot develop of its own. It is the people within the system who have the staying power to run the marathon that will deliver the change that we're all seeking.
For those who now believe, I mean, you say we should not speak from hopelessness, and there are those who will agree with you that all hope is not lost. But there are those who say, look, we've had a taste of two parties. We're not satisfied. Some of them have talked about a third force. I think we heard about that in 2019, a third force, when it was being proposed. I'm wondering, I mean, looking at the challenges that Dr. Innocent Chukwuma already chronicled, assuming a political party were to come up, the fact that it has to have offices in 36 states of the Federation and, you know, all that and all that. Assuming another party were to come up today, that would fit ideologically with the term of a political party. Do you think that today it will stand a chance in Nigeria? Or this, I mean, as Senator Olutumbi said, what we have or what we're getting is what we are demanding, so to speak.
Well, that's why I said that it's not a hopeless situation. I think that what has happened is the failure of the main political parties actually created an opportunity for starting on a clean slate, like Innocent suggested, because the people can then say, we know we don't want this. We've seen it. It's not working. We are getting poorer as a people. We want something different. We want people who think, who can articulate a position, share it with the people to the grassroots, get the people to own the process and become participating. You cannot make change if the people don't own the policies, if the trust deficit is so high. That is the legitimacy crisis we're talking about. It is when you have people believing that these policies are made in our interest, made for us, that they then act in a way that advances achieving the goal of that policy. Public policy is not something you pronounce or construct. Public policy is something that people see as changing the way that they live. And their ownership of it is what makes it successful. But if people feel disconnected from the state or from the political parties, then it doesn't matter how hard you try, you will not achieve your goal. So there is need for the political party system to go back to connecting to the people, to go back to saying this is to hold power accountable. The difference between a democracy and a dictatorship, there's a quote, I forget who, almost immediately, who said it's better for government to fear the people and that's a democracy, than for the people to fear government. That's tyranny. Right now, the people fear government in Nigeria. You want government to fear the people so that we have a democracy.
Well, I apologize to Hafsat Abiola Costello. She's been online. She's the founder of Kudirat Initiative for Democracy. Well, Hafsat, you have been listening to the conversation, and I'd like, first and foremost, your thoughts on political parties in Nigeria.
I think the conversation has been quite insightful, and I agree with Senator Adetunbi that I think that the demand makes a big difference. We need to be demanding, we need to be pushing the political parties, within the political parties, reformers, and they can do more if there's a push. You know, recently we had the NSAS protest. I'm hoping that, and I've been reading that those who were involved in that movement are getting organized now to engage in the political system. And I'm hoping that that getting organized also includes joining political parties. We should see an increase in having a membership drive in the next few days, I think Saturday. We should invade that. We should begin to push our agenda in terms of development. What do we think we should be doing in terms of economic, the economic agenda for Nigeria? What do we think the education agenda should look like? What do we think the security agenda should look like? We shouldn't be waiting and then responding about our disappointment. We need to be more proactive if we really want to see the kinds of changes we want. Because at this time, the political parties are shaped by the key actors in them. And if we're not those key actors, then we won't have much of a say. And I understand that Uncle Patrick Tommy has been involved before. I was also serving in Ogun State Government, as you know, because I used to see you when you came around to the State Secretariat. But, you know, I remember when I wanted to try to get my membership card for APC, it was so difficult. Months, I would talk to some of the party members, my LGA, and say, I want to get my membership card. And they'll say, I've said it's so easy. We can easily get you your membership card, 1,000 naira or something, because I need to pay for the card or something along those lines, and I would pay. But I never got my card until after 8 years in the administration, I still never had a card. And I do think that it's difficult because the processes are difficult, and I think intentionally so. Because, you know, once you're in that system, you have a lot of power. There are things you can change. I literally said, that's precisely why we shouldn't release these political parties to the principal actors on the scene. You know, we need to force our way in. I think that's critically important because right now, the way it's done, once they're funding, they have the power. But if they have enough of a mass base, the mass can fund a party that can be national. If you have a mass base, the people's small payments should match any godfather. It depends on the size of the base. So we need to get to a point where we have political parties that actually have the critical mass, who are themselves funding the party, who are ensuring party discipline, who are driving the party agenda for development, and who are also drawing a line between the party and government. Because the party, whether it's the ruling party or not, is not government. And they should not be hijacking government projects. They should not be hijacking government policies so that they can enrich party members. There has to be a clear line that the work of the government is to govern, and the party is just to identify who within the party should serve in government if they're elected. So these are the kinds of ideas. But I think ultimately the challenge we have in Nigeria is that the generality of people in Nigeria don't understand that the limitations of parties. Now, once the party is in government, then the party should essentially take over the government. I mean, I have a lot of people who are in APC who are very angry about APC because they're giving so much to help APC become ruling party. And now they feel that being hostile, they're becoming anti-APC because they've not been settled. The point of your activism to secure victory for APC was that APC should govern Nigeria. Not that you should get some appointment, but not just talking about the political parties, but to talk about what Nigerians understand about democracy and what is possible within a democracy and what kind of behavior allows democracy to produce broad-based development. Because if when somebody they know gets into office, they'll be able to go, and that's beyond party. So I think there's a general lack of understanding, there's a general lack of respect for what democracy should do and the limitations of power and the use of power in a democracy. And then within the parties, there are all these big players who are trying to control the party as well. So both things are happening at the same time and are fueling a culture of impunity that is not serving people's interest.
Thank you so much, Hafsat, for your contributions. I think that, you have hit the nail on the head. You've talked about, the fact that political parties are not inclusive, and you have also cited your own experience. As we wrap up this session, I want to ask you, Senator, what do you think political parties can do to make them more inclusive? If there is power, power should belong to the people, and there is power in the masses, and masses can fund political parties. Why do you think that they will be against it? And what do you think we can do moving forward to ensure that political parties are more about the people and they're sending the best of the people to represent them?
Thank you for that very, very deep question. And this is something that has been agitating my mind for a while. Let us recognize the limitation of political parties as instruments for attaining power. And then begin to interrogate, what do you do with that power that gives people hope in political parties as instruments of transiting into power? Okay? The question of measurement of governance is a major, major instrument of building confidence in political parties, because you need a political party to get into office, and when you get into office, you receive the power of state to transform lives, economies, and your output in government becomes a source of confidence in that particular political party as a lover of the people, as an institution that can deliver to the interests of the people. And I think that is an area where there isn't sufficient debate. Really, our political parties gain access to power. How much are we able to use that to transform lives, to reduce poverty, put food on the table, get kids in school? The political parties should be having that conversation among themselves, but more importantly, the public should be demanding. The public, and that's what I meant by...
argue that the public is demanding. The NSAS protest was a very clear indication of that demand.
Well, must we wait for things to get to the point of NSAS before voices begin to rise? Must things degenerate to the level of NSAS before...
But if you don't mind, Senator...
Sorry?
If you don't mind, I don't think that NSAS was the beginning. Voices are heard every day in editorials in newspapers. The voices I heard when Melkwe goes up in the morning on television. The voices I heard when members of the political party say, look, can we do something? You and I belong to the same party. I kept harassing the chairman of the party, quietly, peacefully. Let's set up a system where we can bring together those who are elected by our party, educate them on what governance really is, what they should be doing, the economics, the politics, this. Oh, we are coming. And we never got to doing that. He said, no money. I said, I will do it free. I'll bring my friends, they will do it free. The will to do it has not been built into the DNA of the political system. And it needs to, if we are not going to squander. Look, Jürgen Habermas makes the fundamental point about modernity and democracy. It's about rational public conversation. And the political parties need to play a leading role in ensuring rational public conversation on issues. And we're not doing that. That's what the challenge is with our democracy. If the parties had recruited talent, socialized them properly, and got that talent to be out there rationally discussing the issues that affect the lives of the people, the problems of poverty, the problems of community health, the problems of whatever, the people can then become engaged, become part of this process, and change can happen. But we have failed to do that as parties, and we need to change.
Well, I know that this conversation can go on for another hour, but gentlemen and lady, we have to say a very big thank you. We have to wrap up because we're running out of time. Professor Patu Tome, founder and CEO, Center for Value in Leadership, thank you so much for your time this morning. And we wish you Johnny Mercies back as you go to Lagos. Senator Olubunmi Adetumbi, thank you so much for your insights. And Hafsat Abiola Costello, founder, Kudirat Initiative for Democracy, thank you so much for joining us all the way from Brussels. Well, we'll quickly take a group photograph now, and as we do that, we're going to be going very shortly. If you want to know, because there's a whole lot about political parties in this book, we'll be going shortly into the book review session. I think we'll just take it up here. Oh, down. Ladies and gentlemen, sorry for that break in transmission. That's what happens when the MC leaves to go and be taking picture. Anyways, moving on now, I'd like to quickly acknowledge the presence of the chief book presenter, Senator Obasani, who's the chairman, Senate Committee, and other financial institutions. Senator, you're welcome to the program. As we move on now, I'm going to be inviting very quickly the book reviewer for today. He is going to be telling us a lot about the book. Dr. Hussein Abdu is the country director, Plan International, Nigeria. Thank you so much for coming, Doctor.
Good afternoon, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I'm reviewing this book, and I don't want to get into the details of our protocols in Nigeria, but like we are used to, or we say in this kind of gathering, that we stand on existing protocol. I know it's been a long day. I was just whispering to the author and that's Emmanuel that in Abuja, book launch don't last more than 2 hours. It's a maximum. The moment you are spending more than 2 hours, you lose the crowd. And so probably Omano is coming from Kaduna, and we that are Abuja-based people, the lesson is when we are launching a book of this nature, we don't put ourselves with a panel. We go straight to the conversations and get it launched and free people. Anyway, the title of the book, you all have it, is Nigeria, Democracy Without Development, How to Fix It. And the author is our very good friend, Omano Edigheji. The publishers is ILM Media Limited and ZZ Oasis. Published this year, and that's why we are launching it, is a book of 96 pages. And generally, there's been a hell of conversations here since morning about democracy and development. Pardon me if you find me repeating some of the issue. It is probably because I spent the night writing the review. And I didn't expect that there will be conversations of this nature. Globally, democracy has been under significant critical interrogation, both in advanced and in new democracies. The interrogations are informed by increasing right-wing populism, inequality, poverty, slow economic growth, and the shrinking civic space. No time has democracy been this interrogated since the end of the Second World War. While the left, and Your Excellency, the Stalinists, and the Africanist criticism of the liberal democracy has been consistent, we have in the last 10 years seen increasing concerns about the failures of democracy even among liberal scholars. Conversations have shifted from liberal triumphalism of the Fukuyama's end of history style to a more interrogative view of democracy, even among liberal scholars. For instance, we begin to see books like How Democracy Dies, check Stephen Levesky and Daniel Ziblatt, or People versus Democracy, Why Our Freedom is in Danger and How to Save It, by Yaschak. Check The Road to Unfreedom, Russia, Europe, and America, by Timothy. Us versus Them, The Failure of Globalism, by M. Bremer. Or Age of Chaos, Why Democracy is Failing to Deliver Economic Growth and How to Fix It, by Dambisa Moyo. Or you get books like Anti-Pluralism, The Populist Threat to Liberal Democracy. Or the works of Thomas Gressland on Democracies Divided, the Global Challenge of Political Polarization. So wherever you go, the conversations on democracy is around critical interrogations. There are, however, attempts to bolster liberal democracy, even within the African conversations. Check, for instance, Making African Work, which our own Obasanjo was part of, which talks about rewiring politics for Africans' advantage, authored by Greg Mills, Olusegun Obasanjo, Jeffrey Herbst, and Tandai Biti, my also very good friends in Zimbabwe. Dr. Edigheji has through his new book, Nigeria, Democracy Without Development, How to Fix It, joined this global conversation, albeit from a very different perspective. It is a welcome addition to this genre of literature, although looking at the situation from Nigeria and indeed African perspectives. Democracies are failing globally. but the peculiarities of Nigeria are worth examining. Our democracy is often assessed from its normative values, human rights, rule of law, electoral processes, separation of powers, and civic space. Also, because we are a federation, the level of power devolutions and restructuring has been the common issue of concern in our democratic conversations. Without undermining the values of this important element of democracy, the author took a look at a different approach to democracy discourse. Using institutional and development lenses, the book addresses the important problematic of the paradoxical relationship between democracy and development in Nigeria. It examines what the author considered the root causes of democratic failures in Nigeria and argues that Nigeria lacks the internal organizational structure and ideological orientation to promote inclusive, sustainable development. While recognizing the importance of normative values of democracy, including rule of law, civil liberties, the author argued passionately that they are not sufficient conditions for human development, which should be the essence of democracy. Therefore, democracy is failing in Nigeria because it has continually dashed the hope and developmental aspirations of the Nigerian people. In the words of the author, the 20 years of democracy in Nigeria has been marked by increased poverty, inequality, unemployment, underemployment, insecurity, ethno-religious divisions, increased corruption, and continued dependence on oil as a major source of government revenue and foreign exchange. The failure of democracy to guarantee positive development outcome is attributed to poor political leadership and weak institutions driven by absence of developmental elites and state capture through a non-merit-based recruitment of both political leaders and civil servants. Fixing this, according to the author, will therefore require responding to the challenges of weak leadership and weak institutions. The book is structured into 5 chapters, excluding the preface, which introduces the book, and the postscript, where the author shared his dream for Nigeria. Chapter 1 examines the trajectory of Nigeria's democracy, particularly the historical interface between democracy and military authoritarian rule, and the associated struggles that resulted to the Fourth Republic. The author used his internal experience to debunk what he called a sectionalization of the narratives of the struggle, arguing that it was a national struggle. The second chapter examines the development challenges of democracy in Nigeria, especially using secondary statistics of different sources. The chapter specifically examines the different themes of exclusionary social outcomes, including unemployment, underemployment, poverty, inequality, food insecurity, higher maternal mortality, stunted growth amongst children, and low investment in education. The chapter concludes that successive administrations in this democratic dispensation have not only failed to transform the structure of the economy, they also contributed in fostering a non-inclusive economic outcome. The third chapter focuses on the political leadership and the lack of development nationalism and what the author called valueless politics. The author bemoaned the rent-seeking and predatory character of the political elite and attributed the social economic crisis of Nigeria to the absence of both a coalition of developmental elites and broad developmentalist coalition in the struggle in the groups that actually took over power in 1999. This lack of clear development commitment is associated with an observed lack of clear-cut ideology by the 2 dominant political parties that have been in power since 1999. Therefore, electoral politics is not based on party manifesto, but rather on meaningless sloganeering, to use the word of the author. Politics in the country is thus believed to be devoid of loyalty, honesty, integrity, ideology, principles, and intellectualism. To buttress this point, the author examines some of the negative attributes of the system, including godfatherism, which Innocent this morning described as criminal enterprise, lack of internal party democracy, corruption, ethno-religious divisions, and mobilizations. Others include neglect of the health sector, poor governance, and lack of comprehensive development vision, and conflict and insecurity that have pervaded the country. Chapter 4 analyzes the institutional deficit of Nigeria's democracy, using the example of Southeast Asia and the Nordic countries. The author observed that the state institutions have become structural liabilities to democracy. The years of corruption, quota system, and lack of merit in public service recruitment and leadership recruitment has perverted the system, increased the cost of governance, corruption undermined job security and professionalism. As a result of these anomalies and decay, the system is unable to attract its best and the brightest. The author specifically emphasized the value of institutions to development. He observed that democratic developmentalism is largely driven by technocratic public policy and requires a bureaucracy that is competent, professional, disciplined, and efficient. In the last chapter, which is chapter 5, the author provides strong recommendation on how to build a shared prosperous future through a democratic developmental state. Some of the key recommendations include diversifying the economy through industrialization and manufacturing what we take or eat, building the political, technical, and organizational capacities of the state, and enhance bureaucratic efficiency. For me, as a reviewer, I believe Dr. Omano Edigheji, through this book, has made an important contribution to our conversations on democracy and development in Nigeria. The book has not only brought a refreshing perspective to examining the challenges of democracy in Nigeria, it has directly addressed some of the salient issues that often get lost in our ever contentious national discourses. The book is an important shift from the normative democracy and federalist contentions to a more structural, institutional, and developmental conversations. While the normative issues of elections, civic space, and rule of law remain germane to any conversations on democracy, their essence is predicated on how much value they add to the lives of the people. The striking point of this book is the attempt to boldly call out the ruling class for the escalating crisis of democracy and the need for reorientations towards developmental nationalism. For a country that has been badly divided through years of divisive politics, where nationalism has become an anathema under the weight of globalism and internecine contentions, this is quite a timely call. Nevertheless, I have some concern, and there are three of them with this book. First, while I agree with the author substantially on the need for development-oriented ideology, I am not sure that it is correct to say our political class or political parties lack ideology. What we lack is an alternative ideology that is nationalist and developmentalist, something different from what these political parties share. If we take ideology to mean, and also, like His Excellency, taking from the Stalinist Marxian perspective on this, that to take ideology to mean the production of ideas or conception of consciousness, or what men say, imagine, conceive, act as reflected in politics, law, morality, religion, and metaphysics, then we can actually say these political parties do have ideology. The only thing is that the ideology does not correspond with the developmentalist principle that Dr. Omano Edigheji is propounding here. And in fact, the author has in several sections of the book alluded to the ruling class unbridled commitment to neoliberal economic and political doctrines. That is an ideology. These doctrines operate at the level of ideology and shape the character of the state and society. So it is an ideology. What we lack is the alternative. It is in this context that I also wonder what the author thinks about the elaborate provisions in the Chapter 2 of the Nigerian Constitution. The Constitution provides that the state shall direct its policy towards ensuring the promotion of planned and balanced economic development, that the material resources of the nation are harnessed and distributed as best as possible to serve the common good, that the economic system is not operated in such a manner as to permit the concentration, and I say this with emphasis, the concentration of wealth or the means of production and exchange in the hands of a few individuals or of a group, and that suitable and adequate shelter, suitable and adequate food, reasonable national minimum living wage, old age care and pension, and unemployment and sick benefit and welfare of the disabled are provided for by the citizen. This is what the Constitution says. Section 17 of Section 1 of the Constitution also provides that the state social order is founded on the ideals of freedom, equity, and justice. In furtherance of this, Section 17 of Section 2 provides that every citizen shall have equality of right, obligations, and opportunity before the law. The sanctity of human persons shall be recognized, and human dignity shall be maintained and enhanced. Governmental actions shall be humane. Exploitation of human or natural resources in any form whatsoever for any reason other than the good of the community shall be prevented, and the independence, impartiality, and integrity of court and the easy accessibility thereto shall be secured and maintained. These are provisions in the Nigerian constitutions, and although they are easily dismissed as not justiciable, this is what we hear, but it could be an important anchor for our quest for an inclusive and just society. Why should we always operate on the realm of Chapter 4 of the Constitution around human rights, while we don't take the Chapter 2 of the Constitution? We speak more around our social, economic, and cultural rights conversations. For me, it's an important anchor, and it shocks that a lot of us raises conversation about this country without making reference to that provision. My second contention with the author is that while I share the author's concern about the inefficiency, or the crisis of Nigerian public service, I don't share the view that it is caused by zoning or federal character. It is not historically correct to argue that the immediate post-independent civil service was not representational. Quota system or federal character principle does not undermine merit in any way. Corruption and patronage do. It is not possible to manage a diverse society like Nigeria without a form of concessional arrangement. It is particularly so in this age of identity politics. In my opinion, concession is a strength, not a weakness. We need to address the abuses associated with the process, not the issue. Excuse me. Okay, but I have to do this.
So just before he makes the big announcement, I'm going to request Senator Oba to please move to the middle where the book unveiling is going to happen. We're going to ask Dr. Omano too to please join them. Your Excellency, the South African High Commissioner to Nigeria, please join us. And I must apologize. Haja Umi El Rufai, please do join us as well. And former Deputy Governor Balabantex, please. Thank you.
Register significant progress moving from low income to middle income in the last 50 years are states that have practiced this. What Dr. Omano has done is to articulate this argument for the need for development to drive democracy and everything else in a compact little book. And I want to congratulate him for the effort and the publication. I don't know when he had the time, bearing in mind how busy he is as a special advisor, research and publications in the Kaduna State Government. I met Dr. Omano some 12 years ago, I think, in Japan, of all places. That was when we first met. I don't know if he told you this, but I like sharing this story. You know, Omano was in the civil society movement. He was one of those troublemakers that dared to challenge Abacha. Luckily for him, Abacha didn't get to catch him. So he ran away and got his PhD in Norway and finally settled in South Africa. This is why we have the South African High Commissioner here. He didn't come because of me. He came because Omano is married to a nice South African lady called Wendy, and they have 2 beautiful boys. We met with Dr. Omano at the time. I had just finished my first exposure in public service as Minister of FCT, and not yet on exile. I was still a free man, I think. I was not declared wanted. We were invited by the Japanese government to discuss what lessons Africa can learn from Asia. Asian countries have registered the fastest rates of economic growth in history in the last 100 years. In fact, virtually all countries that have crossed from low income to middle and high income are Asian, with a few exceptions, maybe a couple. Maybe Botswana is on its way in Africa, maybe Rwanda is on the way, but most of the others are Asian. And we were assembled, both academics like Omano and practitioners like me, to debate on what lessons we can learn from East Asia. Omano then was a socialist who was arguing for this large state, strong state, and so on. I came from a completely different perspective. I believed that yes, you need a competent state, but you also need to allow markets to be the main criteria for allocation decisions. So we debated. We didn't agree a lot at first, but over time our views have tended to converge. Omano likes to make fun of me that I've become a socialist. He started as a socialist and he has become more, his South African experience and so on, and slight disenchantment with a few things have made him more move to the right, while I have moved more to the left. And I think now we're about at the same position, right? So this is a book I strongly recommend for everyone. It's not a very difficult book to finish in one day. It's 200 pages, I think, or so. And it contains a lot of data, a lot of policy thinking and anecdotes that will be very useful to all African policy makers. So Omano, I congratulate you on the publication. I hope there will be more. And I am quite confident that the Kaduna State Government will buy many copies and share to all our senior public servants, assistant director and above. And it will be one of the texts that will be given out to our Kashim Ibrahim Fellows. Thank you very much, and God bless you. So, can I go?
Nasir El-Rufai, the former Deputy Governor of Kaduna State, in Kaduna, we call him Bantes. Senator Ubasani, my comrade, the High Commissioner of South Africa, Tammy Masaleku, he is a comrade. In South Africa, even in government circle, we still call ourselves comrades. My friends that are here, I really, and all the colleagues, I want to just express my profound gratitude for your presence here today. This book is partly due to the various roles all of you have played in my life. You know, let me make a confession, and I'm a Catholic. The governor will attest to that. You know, as a Catholic, we commit sins, we confess the following morning, and we repeat it. So let me confess this one. I was almost giving up on Nigeria until that trip that he referred to in Japan. And he convinced me that I should not give up hope. This is the country.
Well, the chief host has taken his leave now. He's already explained why he has to. Your Excellency, thank you so much for making time to be able to make this event. Dr. Otibi Igbuzo, I'm wondering if you'll be able to speak. Well, the author now says he's from Kaduna State. You are from Delta State. Are you going to let him go?
Thank you very much. We take judicial notice of that from Omano. In 2023, 2027, we will answer you in Delta State. What can I say? Let me join Omano to thank all of you for being so patient and consistent. I think the book launch has been a resounding success. I'm particularly happy with what the High Commissioner for South Africa said, that is Stalinist. Some of us continue to identify ourselves as Stalinists in a very positive way. Although I heard that Omano has moved to the market. You know. But I think that for me, after this launching, which has showed that democracy in Nigeria has not really delivered a lot of development. The missing point, really, are the people that have practiced this democracy. And so I want to give my closing remarks by calling on Nigerians, especially the middle class, and what the author called the developmentalist elite. Nigeria is one of the few countries in the world where if you are in the middle class and you are participating in the global economy, you live extremely well. Because with $100, you can employ a cook. With $100, you can employ a driver. With $100, you can do a lot of things. And today, even in Nigeria, many people are staying in Nigeria and earning in dollars. Many young people today are writing blogs and getting paid from Nigeria. But unless we intervene decisively in the political arena, democracy will not produce development. The missing link are the kind of people in this country that can make democracy to bring about development. I want to join Omano to thank all of you, and I wish you all journey mercies back home. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have now come to the end of this event. We're now going to be hearing from the publisher, Ms. Emilia Asim, who's going to be given a vote of thanks. Ms. Asim.
So much has been said. Good afternoon, everyone. My job here is simple, and I'd just like to say a very big thank you to everyone who has made this event a success. On behalf of A-Line Media Limited, it's been a pleasure to work with Dr. Omano. We turned 10 yesterday as an organization, and this is, I think, about our 20th title. So I'd like to say a very big thank you to everyone. Wish you a great afternoon and journey mercies back to your respective abodes. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon. Well done. Well done. And that brings us to the end of this event. It's been my pleasure serving you. My name is Maokwe Ogun Yusuf, and I have had fun anchoring this event. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and a wonderful afternoon to you. Your Excellency, thank you so much for waiting to the end. Thank you. We do have refreshments outside. There will be a book signing as well by the author. So if you do pick up a copy of